What if I told you Hollywood's toughest leading man had secret love affairs with Cary Grant, Rock Hudson, and even J. Edgar Hoover? He was the original tough guy, fistfights, war films, women swooning. But behind that legendary glare, Burt Lancaster hid a life no one was allowed to see. A life filled with dangerous secrets, forbidden romances, and a list of lovers that could have ended his career, maybe even his life. This isn't fiction. This is the story Hollywood buried for decades. You know his face, you know the voice. Burt Lancaster wasn't just a movie star, he was the Hollywood alpha, the kind of man who made directors nervous, women obsessed, and men wish they were him. Broad shoulders, a jawline that could cut steel, that piercing stare that said, "Don't mess with me." But here's the twist. Everything you thought you knew about Burt Lancaster was only half the truth, because behind that iron gaze was a man living a double life, one of carefully orchestrated masculinity on camera and a hidden reality behind the scenes that was more fragile, more dangerous, and way more scandalous than anyone dared imagine. He was raised in the grit of 1910s New York, dirt poor, street smart, built like a tank from his years as a circus acrobat. That's right. Before the cameras, before the fame, Lancaster was flipping through the air in a tent for change. He learned early. Strength was survival. Appear tough, be tougher, never show weakness, never let anyone get too close. And that mindset followed him all the way into Hollywood, because in 1940s America, especially in the film industry, being even suspected of same-sex attraction could end your career overnight. And Lancaster, he was already hiding something that, if exposed, would have torn down everything he had built. And if you think that's shocking, wait till you hear who he fell for behind closed doors. Keep watching. This story only gets wilder. Let's talk about old Hollywood's biggest lie. Back then, everything was fake. The relationships, the marriages, even the names. Studios owned their stars. They controlled how they dressed, who they were seen with, even who they were allowed to love. You didn't date someone without the studio's approval. You didn't marry without a PR plan. And if you were gay, you either hid it or they erased you. These weren't just rules, they were survival tactics. Gay actors were forced into fake marriages, hounded by gossip columnists, and stalked by studio fixers who would pay off, blackmail, or silence anyone who threatened the illusion. And this wasn't rare, it was everywhere. Behind the smiles and red carpet photos was an entire shadow system built to maintain a lie. And Burt Lancaster? He played his part perfectly. The brawny hero, the womanizer, the war veteran turned heartthrob. But in reality, he was navigating an emotional minefield, hiding his truest self from a world that would never accept it. And in the middle of this illusion, he fell in love with men who were just as famous, just as trapped, and just as terrified as he was. One of them, Cary Grant. Yeah, that Cary Grant. And what happened between them was nothing short of electric. Now imagine this. Two of Hollywood's biggest names, two impossibly handsome men, both at the peak of their fame, and both with everything to lose. That was Burt Lancaster and Cary Grant. Their first meeting? It sounds like a movie scene. An upscale industry gathering in Beverly Hills. Soft jazz playing, camera flashes popping, tuxedos and champagne. Lancaster, all grit and danger. Grant, the definition of polished charm. They didn't run in the same circles, but when their eyes met across that room, something clicked. Something they both had spent their entire careers pretending didn't exist. According to Lancaster's private recollections, the chemistry was immediate. He described it as a silent pull between two men who had learned to hide everything but couldn't hide from each other. And so began one of the most secret, most delicate affairs in Golden Age Hollywood. They would meet in total secrecy. Private rentals along the Pacific Coast Highway, far from cameras and press. No staff, no witnesses, just them. Walking the beach, reading poetry, even cooking for each other. Grant apparently made a killer Italian omelet. But make no mistake, this wasn't just some fling. Lancaster was captivated. He called Grant's laugh a silk thread that could wrap around your heart. Okay, this is where things take a dark turn, because while a romance with Cary Grant was dangerous, this next one could have been deadly. Burt Lancaster once told a close confidant about a brief, disturbing encounter with J. Edgar Hoover. Yes, that Hoover. The director of the FBI, the man who knew everyone's secrets and made people disappear if they talked too much. He wasn't an actor, he wasn't even part of the film world directly. But Hoover's grip on Hollywood was very real, monitoring scripts, threatening studios, and controlling how law enforcement and morality were portrayed on screen. And yet, according to Lancaster, they had a private relationship, one that blurred the lines between politics, power, and repressed desire. They met at a charity gala in Washington, D.C., surrounded by senators, generals, and socialites. Lancaster had been invited as a Hollywood guest. Hoover was in full control of the room. He noticed Lancaster immediately, approached him, spoke quietly. Lancaster later described Hoover's energy as cold, calculating, but hungry. Behind closed doors, their relationship was not tender. It was a mix of intimidation, fascination, and strange emotional games. There was no love in it, only secrecy, control, power. Lancaster didn't even know if he was attracted to Hoover or just curious about the twisted magnetism he projected. He later said, Hoover wasn't a man who wanted connection. He was the perfect leading man, tall, devastatingly handsome, effortlessly charming. To the world, Rock Hudson was the ideal American heartthrob. But to Burt Lancaster, he was something else entirely. Their first meeting happened quietly, far from cameras, on the set of a 1950s film where their paths briefly crossed. Lancaster, by then a Hollywood heavyweight, Hudson, a rising star, but already shackled by a secret he couldn't escape. He was gay, completely, hopelessly, tragically, locked in a golden cage built by studio executives and PR agents who made sure not one single rumor ever made it to the press. Hudson was forbidden to be himself. He lived in fear, constant, bone-deep fear. Every movement, every glance, every friend he had to explain away as just a buddy. And yet, when he met Burt, something cracked open. Their connection wasn't explosive. It was slow burning, soft smiles on set, stolen moments. Then quietly, they began taking weekend road trips, two of the biggest stars in the world, vanishing into the California desert like fugitives. No paparazzi, no phones, just miles of open road. If that relationship had gone public, Hollywood would have burned. But the next one, it was even more forbidden and far more dangerous. If Rock Hudson was the silent storm, Marlon Brando was the wildfire you could never contain. Burt Lancaster and Brando weren't just lovers. They were rivals, opposites. Two forces of nature crashing together in a private war of lust, intellect, and ego. Their first meeting? It wasn't romantic. It was combustible. A politically charged event in the late 1950s. Hollywood elites packed into a swanky hotel ballroom. Brando showed up late, shirt slightly unbuttoned, cigarette dangling from his lips. He didn't shake hands. He challenged people. Lancaster watched him, fascinated. Because Brando wasn't just talented, he was dangerous. According to Lancaster, they locked eyes during a heated conversation about civil rights and Vietnam, and instead of backing down, Brando leaned in. That night ended with them alone in a suite. Two Hollywood icons, face to face, and neither willing to blink first. And from that moment forward, their relationship burned like a lit match in a room full of gasoline. Brando was impulsive, erotic, completely unfiltered. He once showed up at Lancaster's house at 3 a.m., barefoot, with a bottle of whiskey and a loaded question. Do you think I'm real? Or just what they made me? They fought, they laughed, they tore each other apart emotionally and physically. Lancaster once said, Brando could make you feel like the most alive man on earth, and the most invisible one, too. They never defined what they were. Was it love? Obsession? Competition? Maybe all of it, maybe none of it. They'd disappear for weeks, only to return with bruises. Sometimes emotional, sometimes not. It lasted years, on and off, quiet, violent, addictive. But in the end, it collapsed under the weight of their own egos and the world that never gave them space to just be. Lancaster described Brando as the only man who could make me feel undone just by looking at me. And when they finally split for good, neither of them ever spoke of it publicly, but their silence said everything. By the 1980s, Burt Lancaster was already a legend. The box office hits, the Oscars, the public image of a tough, brilliant, masculine icon, all still intact. America loved him. Men wanted to be him. Women wanted to marry him. But here's the truth Hollywood never told. Burt Lancaster had lived his entire life behind a mask. Every smile at a press event, every kiss on a red carpet, every photo with a co-star, it was all perfectly staged. Because if anyone had found out what he was really feeling, really hiding, it could have been the end. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was protecting everyone, his lovers, his family, his legacy, and that silence, it cost him. He carried the weight of secrecy for decades. He watched the men he loved vanish into fake relationships, shame, or illness. He attended parties with them and had to pretend they were strangers. He built his career on roles that demanded strength, stoicism, and control, while inside he was filled with heartbreak, memory, and guilt. Because every time he fell in love, it came with a ticking clock. He could never keep it, he could never claim it. And still, he loved deeply, recklessly, quietly, late in life, long after the cameras faded and the spotlights dimmed. Burt began to open up to a few trusted friends. Not for shock, not for pity, but for peace. He wanted to be remembered not just as the man on the screen, but as a human being who felt, who hurt, and who spent most of his life hiding something beautiful in a world that didn't allow it to exist. Burt Lancaster died in 1994. No funeral, no public farewell, just ashes scattered under a quiet oak tree in Westwood. But in his final years, he finally spoke the truth. Not for shock, but for peace. Because behind every Hollywood legend is a human being, begging to be seen,